Good evening and welcome. Tonight I will be going over the history and geography of Balochistan in Pakistan. Just a quick word about pronunciation, because as some of you know who are regular viewers, I try to keep things in the American English pronunciation. And in American English, this country is pronounced Pakistan, which I know is not how you say it in most countries. I know it's Pakistan, but since there's really no way to say Balochistan properly in American English, I can actually pronounce it how it should be, which is probably also not totally right, but it's Balochistan in Pakistan, okay? That being said, as you can see, this is an absolutely massive area of Pakistan. It's about 40% of Pakistan, the largest region in the country. However, it is the least populated. Almost the entire area here is covered in really spectacular mountains. This is considered part of the Suleiman Mountains. And as you can see, my map here denotes all of the various prominent ranges here. You can see the Macron ranges over here. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot to go through in this episode tonight. So, as usual, I will give you the Cliff Notes version of geography and history just because there's so much. So I'm sorry for any Pakistani viewers who might get upset if I skip over something. Just put it down in the comments, okay? So we can all have the complete story of the region. But many, many mountain ranges, beautiful canyons, gorgeous rivers flowing through them, and most of them have towns and cities inside of them, the capital being Quetta, right here. Another important city we're going to talk about is Gwadar, which is down here on the coastline here. The majority of the coastline is on the Arabian Sea, but this half is part of the Gulf of Oman, which I suppose is all part of the Indian Ocean per se, but all the major bodies of water in the world are split up into seas and things like that. So this is the Arabian Sea here. The border just passes by Karachi. You can see right there. Can you see it? You can barely see it. There's Karachi. And we are bordering tonight Afghanistan and Iran, which is very, very important to the region's history and modern news today. Because as you can see, this area is Balochistan. And you can see Iranian Balochistan over here. This whole area here was considered Balochistan. So there's an Iranian side and a Pakistani side. And we'll talk about that in its history. Down here along the coast, we have the Hingol National Park, which is a really beautiful place. I think we're going to go here first on Google Earth. It's on UNESCO's tentative list. There's actually a lot of places in Balochistan on UNESCO's World Heritage Site tentative list. This is one of them because it has some incredible geological aspects to it. It has some amazing rock formations known as hoodoos or fairy chimneys. And it has mud volcanoes, which is so exciting because I only usually talk about mud volcanoes when we're talking about Azerbaijan. So it's always neat to talk about mud volcanoes in a different context. But even more importantly, there is a cave along the river here, you can see. That is very sacred to Hindus. There is a major Hindu pilgrimage here every year. And of course, we'll take a look at all of that on Google Earth after the history segment. One of the other UNESCO sites is in the town of Ziraat, which I always have trouble finding. My goodness, there's Kalat. Kalat is very important in Balochistan's history. It is up here, Ziraat. And Ziraat is on the tentative list because it has a beautiful juniper forest next to it, and it's full of incredible, very endangered wildlife, and is believed to have the world's oldest juniper trees. They're about 4,000 years old, it's estimated. Isn't that incredible? But let's start with the ancient history here. You can see flowing along here is the Indus River, one of the most important rivers of the ancient world. The mountains here, you'll see it on Google Earth, kind of follow the flow of the river as it curves here through what's now Pakistan. This was the home of the Indus River civilization, and we call them that because we can't decipher their alphabet, and we don't know what they called themselves. But one of those towns along the river is located in what's now Balochistan. It's about here or so, it's not on my map, and it is called Marga. Indus Valley civilization is really incredible because they were quite advanced for the time. Like having a sewage system, for one thing, that's pretty incredible back in the day. This would have been about 7,000 BCE. The Egyptians didn't have sewage. The Greeks didn't have sewage. The Romans didn't have sewage. But these guys did. Way, way long ago. The Mesopotamians didn't have a sewage system. Pretty remarkable. They were quite advanced in some ways, but we'll probably never know just how advanced they were because we can't read their alphabet. It's so sad. But yeah, one of their towns was over here. And of course, it was an important trading network between the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia over there in what's now Iraq. And we only know the names of these cities because the people in Mesopotamia wrote it down, and we can read their writing called cuneiform. But the first major, settlements in the area here would have been people of Indo-Aryan descent, which basically in layman's terms is Indian today, for the most part, in a nutshell. These people were practicing Hindus, and they shared a lot of culture with people throughout the Indian subcontinent. And as the Persian Empire grew in prominence in the region, they adopted a lot of the customs and lifestyles of the Persian Empire and Achaemenid Empire later on down the road. Alexander the Great would go on to conquer the Achaemenid Empire, and he actually marched through this area on his way toward India. And I believe it's around here where his men were like, okay, this is the worst. It's very mountainous. They trudge through a lot of desert where there is no water, and then they're going up these horrible mountains, which you'll see later on. They're quite unforgiving. I'm sure that's what contributed to his men saying, Alexander, listen, we gotta go home. We gotta go back to Greece. This is too much for us. And some of his fleet sailed here along the coast, and some went back by land to go home. The name Macron here actually comes from that time. Alexander's fleet sailed by what's now Gwadar, and they noted that the people there ate a lot of fish. So they called them the fish eaters in Greek. It got translated into Persian, the accounts of the voyage back. And the Persian word for the people who eat fish sounds a lot like Macron, which is how we get the word Macron today. This whole coastal region is known as the Macron today. Pretty neat, I think. But at this time, there were no Baloch in Balochistan, which, if you know your word etymologies, you know that it means the land of the Baloch. I've seen some conflicting times about when the Baloch arrived here. I'm going to go with the official Balochistan government website, which says the 5th century is when the Baloch arrived. The Baloch were nomadic people, and it was around this time that they began to settle in what's now Balochistan, right? The whole general area here. They started to realize that maybe the people here have got it figured out and maybe they should build houses. Not saying that that's better or worse than nomadic lifestyle. Just saying that's what they thought back then, probably, most likely. And a couple centuries later, in the 7th century, Islam would arrive, which is the predominant religion in not just Balochistan, but all of Pakistan. It's kind of its thing. It's kind of the reason it exists. And the area would be ruled by various Muslim dynasties for quite a while. I know I always say that going over this time, but there's so many places in the world that I covered recently that I feel like, well, it was the Umayyads, then the Abbasids, and just like listing all of these dynasties every time. So I always just say various Muslim, I guess, kingdoms, we'd say in English, controlled the area for a long time. Many different powers over the next following years and so would battle for this area. The Mongols came in the more northern areas. They didn't really make it down here in the south. And throughout like the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, this area went back and forth between the Mughal dynasty, over mostly in what's now India, between various powers in what's now Afghanistan, and against various Persian powers. To put everything in a little nutshell, again, remember this is the Cliff Notes, not going over every single time a powerful empire conquered a part of this area, because again, it's very huge, and various powers conquered other parts. The only one that was really consistent was probably Kalat, the Sultanate of Kalat. Existed for a long time on its own, very independently. But not because no one wanted it. They'd fought off people. But it was neither of those powers that would take over. The people who would take over this area was, of course, the British. The British absorbed Balochistan into British India in 1876. They had conquered pretty much the entirety of what's today India and Pakistan. But there was one little bit of Balochistan that they did not conquer, and that was the town of Gwadar here on the coast. And that is because let me check the year. Oh, I didn't write down a year. In like the late 18th century, this town was snatched up by Oman. Well, what we now call Oman, I believe it was the Sultanate of Muscat at the time. And it was Omani. The Omanis were big into Indian Ocean trade. Can you see Oman? You can't see Oman. Oman's literally right there. So it's just there's Muscat right there. So it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Muscat. But they had powers all around the Indian Ocean, on the African coast, the Arabian Peninsula, and here in Gwadar. Jumping ahead to the partition of India and Pakistan. So, long story short, India was working toward independence from Britain. Pakistan was alongside them, but things were a little tense because there had always been religious tension between Hindus and Muslims in this corner of the world. And the Muslim leaders over here decided that the solution would be to break away from India and create their own Muslim country. And that's a bit of an issue, especially here in Balochistan, because as you heard in the beginning, along in the south here, there is quite a large Hindu community. So they wanted to split the country off into Muslim sections and Hindu sections, even though Hindus lived in the Muslim sections, Muslims lived in the Hindu sections, and it was quite a debate. But nevertheless, it happened. The country split in, what was it, 1948, I want to say? Hello, cat. 1948? No, 1946. 1946. The cat's here to help remember the partition of India. I believe it was 1946. Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't write it down. It's off the top of my head. There were parts of Pakistan that were obviously hesitant to join Pakistan. We already talked about Azad Kashmir up there, which is still an issue today. But most of Balochistan was a bit hesitant to join. Most of it did eventually join Hello Cat in 1947. But the Sultanate of Kalat was still very much in power at the time. And they were not interested in joining. They wanted to be an independent state. And they really tried to argue their way into maintaining their independence. But they would eventually give in 1948. This little corner down here, Gwadar, was still part of Oman. Oman would give in to Pakistan in 1952. And thus all of Balochistan became part of Pakistan. And yes, one of the issues with the partition was that millions upon millions of people crossed the borders between the two countries. The Muslims fleeing to India. The Hindus fleeing to India. The Muslims fleeing to Pakistan. The cat's here to correct me. There's this big long tail. He's looking for trouble because I'm not paying attention to him as usual. Okay, kitten. You're going to start messing with audio stuff if you're not careful. Thank you. I'm very precariously perched on this desk. That's why there's a bit of a camera wobble. I try to fix that in post, but I do what I can. Let's talk about some of the more modern news in Balochistan, which is, for the most part, very sad and upsetting, and I'm going to censor myself, not just because it's very sad and upsetting and not relaxing, not conducive for ASMR, but it could get this video demonetized if I don't phrase it correctly. So, that being said, some slightly positive news, I suppose, is that Gwadar down here in the early 2000s made some deals with the Chinese government for the Chinese to build infrastructure in the area. And all of these roads you see and the airport here were built by the Chinese. But lots of people weren't happy about that. The Chinese are still trying to invest more into, I believe they still are, right? I know they've taken deals with other countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran. But most countries don't do gifts like that without expecting something in return. So the fact that they want more interest concerns people. There was a big protest actually like a month ago from me filming this. It was the end of July 2024 into August that I read in a news article, that's why I'm mentioning it, that they were protesting the Chinese involvement. But mainly they were protesting for Baloch rights. And the police force there fired upon the crowd, launched tear gas at them, which only made the protests, which only made the protests bigger and louder. And it's still an ongoing issue to this day. So we really do hope that all is going to be well and everyone will remain as safe as possible while expressing their rights here. Very important to be heard, but also important to be safe. Speaking of safety, I forgot to mention the border here with Iran. So when this area was controlled by the British, obviously this is Persia. This is British India. The British never really sat down with Persia to determine where the line should be drawn. I guess they didn't really care. I think Persia probably cared a bit. The British had many other problems to deal with. And the border wasn't drawn up until, let me check the year in my notes. 1959 was when Pakistan and Iran finally established an actual factual border here. And that is an issue because this is Balochistan, right? Balochistan essentially was split into two parts, in two different countries. And there were a lot of issues with that. Some Baloch believe that that's just the worst, in that it should be abolished and Balochistan should be its own independent nation. And there are, I guess, to phrase it in a YouTube-friendly way, some rebel fighters who are going to the biggest extreme to get their voices heard and to fight for what they believe in. If you know what I mean, right? There have been events along the border here, mainly up here. Iran's been building a fence, like a border fence. Although I was trying to look up pictures, I didn't really see any on Google Earth to try to keep people out. But Iran accuses Pakistan of harboring not nice people, people who explode things on purpose. Let's call it that, to keep it as YouTube friendly as possible. People who explode things on purpose, to fight against the Iranian government. Pakistan accuses Iran of harboring people who like to explode things on purpose, who are against Pakistan and the government here in Balochistan. Maybe they're both right, maybe they're both wrong. Either way, there is a lot of tension along the borders here and in many parts of Balochistan in particular, trying to keep people safe from the people who explode things on purpose. And to try to stave off a full-on war, we don't want that, of course. Considering all the things going on in the world at this time, I don't think that would help anybody at this time. So it's very tense right now in Balochistan, and again, all we want on this channel is for peace and love, and for everyone to find happiness in the most peaceful way possible. Especially in this area, because it is just so beautiful. I gotta show you on Google Earth. This place is pretty special in terms of its physical geography. There's so many incredible formations here that seem man-made. They are not. It's all natural. So why don't we head over to the tablet and check it out. Here we are in Balochistan. I need to wiggle my fingers extra because I was at a weird angle and half my hand is asleep. Here we are in Balochistan. Let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. You can see just how large Balochistan is. It is massive. So there's Pakistan right here. India is over here. We have Afghanistan to the north, Iran to the west, and here's the Arabian Sea part of the Indian Ocean. Ignore my cat playing with his toys in the background. He's really got into a crinkly things phase, which aren't we all here in this community? Now, as you can see from above, these mountains are just so interesting, and you can really see how they follow the flow of the Indus River. Kind of makes this curvy little shape here, and the mountains make a curvy shape around it. But it's so spectacular from above. It really just looks like God got out the finger paints and just went like that, is what it looks like, to me at least. Why don't we? Oh, I promised you we'd start off down here in the Hingle National Park, which is a very large park. It's like pretty much this entire area here, but I'll show you. There's some pictures here in the slideshow. Oh, it's thinking. There we go. That I can't find on Google, so I'll look at them here. This gorgeous canyon to start with. Isn't that beautiful? This looks like you'd see this maybe in like Arizona or something like that. Really spectacular. And this is the Sphinx, which at first glance looks like someone carved a sphinx into this rock, doesn't it? But they didn't. This is a natural formation. All of this is natural formation. Isn't that incredible? I think there's a picture in here. There's the coast of it from a different angle. Look at, isn't that spectacular? It's like a big sandbox, isn't it? Let's see if I can find it. Beautiful coastline. Look at this. So incredible. Just incredible sights all around here. Thought it was in the slideshow. Wow, look at a chunk just like ripped off there. It looks like, yep. I think this is the Sphinx from like the back, so you can tell it's not man-made. Very interesting, I think. Let's start off by looking at this cave. So there's a camping site over here for people. Of course, people come in droves every year for this festival. So they camp out here along the river and they begin the long hike up here to reach this cave. And I don't exactly remember the story behind it. It has to do with this goddess who I believe hid out or maybe even died in this cave, I think the story went. So many Hindu worshippers come here every year to give her offerings and pray. And I assume enjoy the beautiful landscape here. So there she is. I'm not sure what that is. But yeah, hiking up to this cave, apparently it's quite arduous and not for everyone. I've read that some people just come to the camp area or just kind of go halfway and camp out because it's too much for some people, which that's totally fine. Over here, isn't that pretty formation there? Let's see. I found a lot of sites very easily on my own, which means I'm going to struggle to find them when I'm filming. But I found these mud volcanoes. Chandragroup 1, Chandragroup 2. And it's just a classic mud volcano, isn't it? There's my cat in his litter box, ignoring it. But look at all this mud and twigs here. They are just classic looking volcanoes filled with mud. Look at this. Pretty neat. I bet that mud is very hot. I assume. But a part of me just wants to touch it, you know. Make it into a clay mask. I bet that would be very invigorating, but it would probably burn your face off, to be honest. Let's see if I can find this other site I want to show you. There's loads of sites around here. Highly encourage you to check them out. Right here, this is the Princess of Hope, and it's another hoodoo or fairy chimney that has a very unusual shape. Doesn't it look like a lady standing nice and tall? Princess of Hope. The cat is now playing in and out of his crinkly toys. I'm very sorry, or you're welcome. Princess of Hope has an interesting story because she was named by, you guessed it, Angelina Jolie. Yes, the Angelina Jolie. Angelina, who I love, I think she's a fantastic actress, saw this hoodoo and exclaimed, "Oh, that's the Princess of Hope." Like it just was her instant reaction to say. The name stuck. It's all the selfies. And that is the name that this rock formation is called today. The Princess of Hope. What a strange story, right? But there's all kinds of beautiful sites here. I highly, highly encourage you to check it out. Over here is Gwadar, which you'd look at this and be like, oh, this has to be man-made. That it's like in Dubai or something where they carve out and fill in islands with sand and create these neat shapes. But you'd be wrong. This is all natural. And I don't know, I kind of think maybe it has to do with maybe the... Thank you, Kat. I really appreciate you playing very loudly while I'm filming. I'm really glad you're doing that. I think it has to do with the Gulf of Oman over here and the Arabian Sea over here. Maybe they kind of flow into each other. I'm not sure. That's my explanation. Maybe one of you know. But this is the city of Gwadar. You can see here. Spilling out here. I guess we can look at Koibatu. Kind of get a look. See, there's the big, long, I guess like an isthmus in a way, which is the actual city. And I should have mentioned this, but Oman snatched this place up because it's a perfect natural harbor. It's a perfect port, which the Omanis were all about. The Indian Ocean trade, so that's very important. Wow. What a neat lookout point to just look out and observe. Big old Pakistan flag. This incredibly strange landform, right? So neat. And there's like another one over here. Moving down, moving down. See, look, there's another one. But there's no major cities on this one. I mean, that's Omara. But it's not as big as Gwadar. But look at that cliff. Spectacular. Spectacular. Not to diminish Omara. It's just, it didn't pop up in my research at all. But I know it's there. What else should we look at? What I've been doing lately is just kind of zooming in on a mountainous area and just oohing and awing at it. See, now you know when I was talking about Alexander marching through, how daunting it must have been to try to cross something like that, right? Look at over here. Like, how exactly do you cross something like that? I guess very carefully is the answer, right? Most of these places don't have very good slideshows. They do have slideshows, but most of them are selfies. We can look at Quetta, the capital city, which I believe it was made the capital after the partition, because the natural capital would have been... Oh, I can't find anything now. Kalat. Because Kalat was always like the most prominent city throughout Balochistan's history. But like I said, they did not want to join Pakistan at first, so they made it Quetta. I believe that's the story. Correct me if I'm wrong. Pretty sure that's what happened. But you can see it's a big old thriving city. Let's see if the slideshow gives us anything. Lots of shopping there. Of course, big roundabouts. Nice little well there. Big city. Hopefully that's Quetta. And some herders there. Yeah, most of these slideshows are not that great. We can check out... look how large Quetta technically is. Oh, there's this beautiful park over here. Actually, I think there's a better slideshow. Maybe that is it. Oh, there's two slideshows in this national park. I always see Cheeton, like the Japanese character. Don't listen to me. This beautiful landscape here, which again reminds me of like Arizona. I know when we were just in Turkmenistan a few days ago, I was like, this looks like New Mexico. Oh, this doesn't. My goodness, that's gorgeous. Wow. Wow, look at this snow. This is giving me more Arizona or even very Southern California vibes. Just very beautiful landscape in a little barren way. Some wild dogs, maybe some wolves. Beautiful tree. Isn't that a lovely tree? And there's a lovely park here just outside of Quetta. where you can take all of your selfies. Let's see. I need to show you Mirgar, which doesn't have a little pop-up here, so I have to type it in. Give me a second. Mirgar. Dun, 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 dun. Ancient city here of Mirgar. I believe it's not nearly as... Oh, look how blurry it is. There's not really good satellite photos of it. Not as well excavated as other Indus Valley cities, from what I understand, but still very majorly excavated. Remnants of old houses, beautiful architecture. See, it's all covered up to preserve it. Paintings there of old herders. Yeah, the Indus Valley civilization built roadways in like neighborhoods. They were really into house buildings. Like the majority of their homes were, can you identify the goats? Were houses, just regular houses where people just lived out their daily lives, carving weird little statues of breastfeeding aliens. That's a neat statue. Some incredible statues have come out of Mohenjo-daro, and by statues I mean figurines that are literally this big. That thing's probably that size. We don't know why they carved those things. We'll probably never know, to be honest, which is really sad. Maybe some code breaker someday will figure out their alphabet. I suppose I will end this on the junipers. Not a lot. I always lose it. Every time. There we go. Zierat. It always takes me a minute to find Zierat. I don't know why. But here's a Zierat juniper forest. Here on this beautiful hillside. They look like ants, don't they, from up high? This beautiful mountainside. Let's end the video while we look at these beautiful juniper trees. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Especially since we have a lot of places coming up that are very interesting. Tomorrow we're going to be heading over to Jordan, where we're going to look at a very gorgeous city. And an incredible UNESCO site, actually, that is believed to be the place where Jesus was baptized along the River Jordan. So you don't want to miss that. It's a really incredible place. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good